Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and the title is Finding Your Foods. So recently I got an email from a listener, so thank you for chiming in and letting me know you guys exist. But they had asked about diets related to blood types or like DNA tests. So it's in a sense like trying to figure out how do you find a diet structure, and mostly concerning with like food variations or food types that best matches your body. So how can you decide or find out or learn what you digest best? And there are a lot of claims out there for different types of diets. So, and the most common ones related to this are like blood type diets and stuff, where somebody says like, oh, I've even seen like astrology ones where, if you're born at, if you have this astrology sign, you should probably eat these type of foods. So there's a whole bunch of craziness out there. In a sense, what I want to get into on this one is if we look past like all the kind of BS and salesmanship and just want to do this ourselves. How do we actually find the foods that we digest best? So that way you don't have to pay a bunch of money to get some test done that might not even be true. So the idea of like our blood type telling us exactly how we should eat is there are so many factors involved in how we digest food that it would be impossible, in my opinion, to do a single test and say, okay, for this single reason, you should eat these foods all the time. And part of the reason why is because our food preferences, our food tolerances, they change depending on like things in our childhood, like what foods we were exposed to at what ages, where we grew up, which meant like kind of what foods were available to us, and then like lifelong habits in the terms of what foods have we eaten most of our life. Our body has potentially developed bacteria and kind of preference to digest those foods. Now, sometimes people have eaten something their entire life that causes them some kind of irritation or inflammation because their body can't adjust to it. But in general, outside of disease states or specific conditions, our body does its best to adjust to what we do. So meaning if I eat the same, say 12 foods all the time, my body's going to learn how to digest those foods optimally. And whenever I throw in some weird new thing, it can often mess up stuff. And it can cause like, gas, irritation, bloating, things like we relate to like irritable bowel syndrome. So type of stuff like that. Where if we stay with mostly consistent foods, our body has a pretty good chance of kind of figuring out how to digest stuff well. Now, that is a general statement. So I have met tons and tons and tons and tons of people. So like I've said in the past podcasts, is I have well over 1,000 client history. So I've been personal training for 17 years. I am young, I'm only 35 years old, but I started doing this at 18, so I have a lot of years under my belt. And I've used to teach at a university, so I have a lot of experience and a lot of people I've worked with. And we'll get into some of the details here later on, is there are absolutely cases where somebody, has been trying their best to eat a certain healthy food because it's what they think is healthy for them, but it's not digesting well and it is causing issues. So it might be a food that like is deemed healthy by the nutrition world, or a food that would show up as okay on a blood test, or a DNA test or something like that. But you have a specific issue against that food, your body can't digest it. So although things like DNA tests and blood types and all that stuff, I don't like to just downright like poo-poo on things, because would it give somebody maybe a place to start? Sure. But do you have to pay the money in order to know where to start? No, absolutely not. So that's what I want to share in this one. Okay. We also have differences, real quick, I want to cover digestive differences, as people can have, the same blood type, but somebody within a certain blood type can be lactose intolerant and another person not be. Somebody can have a gluten intolerance and somebody else cannot be. So there isn't necessarily a single test that kind of tells us that. Then also there's enormous differences in lifestyles. If somebody's very active and they're up and active and they exercise a lot, they have a lot of muscle mass, and they're lean, relatively lean in body weight, body fat, I mean, they're going to process foods faster. They're going to be able to eat more throughout the day and feel better. If somebody's inactive and they're overweight, they're going to have a more sluggish feel, like after they eat food. That has nothing to do with body type or blood type or anything like that. It's just they're inactive and they don't do anything. So their metabolism is kind of like running low all the time. So they don't digest food easily. They don't digest food well. So the more movement you can get in your day, the more fluid you drink, like hydration, like water, not soda, non-carbonated fluids. The more movement and non-carbonated fluids you get, the better your digestive system is going to feel. So there is enormous differences. So you could be eating something that's quote unquote appropriate for your body, but if you're inactive and you're dehydrated all day, that's not going to go well. So it won't feel good. So there's so many factors that it's going to be impossible to kind of rely on a singular test. So let's talk about how we would go about doing this. So I have worked with people before who have like severe cases of like Crohn's disease or celiac disease, severe cases of food allergies, and we've had to do what would be considered like a food elimination or food addition diets. And what I want to do is kind of talk you guys through a process of how to do that yourself, so that way you can kind of make your own foods list that is appropriate for you, and then you can stick to that list kind of like forever and ever if you want, and be certain that you're going to feel the best you can for the factors that you can control. So after you do, if you actually listened to this podcast and did the things I tell you to do, which I'm aware not everybody does, but if you do this, it will give you the best sense of control. You're still going to have good meals and bad meals and good days and bad days. That's just life. But it's going to give you the most sense of control over your food so you can feel the best for you. Okay? So what we typically do is to start with foods that you already eat that you know are kind of healthy. So if you eat ice cream every night, that's not a healthy food. Don't use that. Okay? But stick with foods that you're already pretty common in your diet that you know are healthy. And what you want to do is keep a food journal for 2 weeks. I like 2 weeks as a minimum. I've had people do it for a month. After a month, it's not really necessary anymore, unless they just like the discipline factor of it, and it keeps them on track healthy eating wise. But 2 weeks is a good minimum for what we're about to do here. So with this food journal, all you have to do is track how you feel after you eat your meals. So you don't have to write down it is helpful to write down the foods, and I'll give a case here in a second. But you're not going to be like counting macros, you're not counting calories, you're not counting, grams of this, grams of that. So it's not that much work. But what you're going to do is rate yourself after your meals, okay, on a scale of 1 to 3. If you eat a meal and you felt awful from it, you got no energy, or you had stomach cramps, like digestive issues, maybe you had to run to the bathroom, you want to give that meal a 1. Okay? You're going to rate that food a 1. Now, when you do rate foods 1, okay, a meal to 1, you have to write down what those foods were. So that is the only kind of like active part that you have to actually really do, is write down what meals were 1s. Okay? If you ate a meal and you felt fine, there was nothing like noteworthy after it, it's a normal meal for you, okay? You can just rate it as a 2. If you eat a meal and you kind of feel energized, you feel light and refreshed, you're kind of like, you just all of a sudden just feel like, man, I got really good energy from that meal, I feel good, like that must be like one of my really good foods. You want to rate that as a 3, okay? Now this can also be related to other things, like, sometimes people are trying to figure out like what is giving them heartburn, so they can do these ratings for heartburn. So 1 being like, oh my God, like I ate that, my throat was on fire, I didn't feel good, I had acid reflux, I was burping for a while. So you can rate that as a 1. If you felt fine, you'd be 2 or 3. So you can use this for kind of different scenarios than we have in the past. But in these cases, when you have meals that are rated as a 1, you do want to write them down, like what the foods were, so that way you don't repeat them. It's kind of common sense. If you got meals that were 2 or 3, you don't have to write those down if you don't want to, if they're just normal foods. But you can write them down to be more active in creating a list that you can refer to later on in life. Okay, so you could just say like, okay, maybe this meal I had a turkey sandwich. It was wheat bread. Maybe I had like American cheese, a little bit of like Duke's mayonnaise, maybe some turkey breast, like white turkey breast on it. Maybe even throw on like a tomato and some lettuce, stuff like that. And you just write those things down and say that, hey, turkey sandwich, totally fine, I'm good to go. And that would be good. So that kind of adds to your list. So that's essentially what you're going to do for 2 weeks is if you have a really bad meal, rate it as a 1, write those foods down, and then avoid those foods. Okay, for the next 2 weeks. So what you want to try to do is as you run into something that doesn't feel good, that messes up your digestion, you want to then try to avoid that food for the remainder of the time of the 2 weeks. So that way you don't continue to cause inflammation and irritation to your digestive system as you're trying to figure out the other good foods. So once your digestive system is too annoyed, like you ate something really bad that kind of, got you sick, you had to go to the bathroom, it can potentially take up to 3 days to reset like your gut bacteria and make you feel good again. So sometimes the meal right after a meal that annoyed you, you might be kind of like tempted, like, ugh, I don't know, I still feel kind of crappy from the previous meal. So it's going to be hard sometimes if you eat something that really irritates you. You kind of have to maybe wait, a day or so before you can really start analyzing things again. But chances are most of you are not going to run into this issue. When I've worked with people with Crohn's disease or some severe issues before, anytime they had a flare-up, we had to wait 3 days before we could rate things again because almost anything was making them sick at that point because their system had got kind of skewed. So that's essentially what you're doing. So 2 weeks, you're going to rate your meals 1, 2, or 3. Write down if they were bad foods, write them down and avoid them, okay? So examples of this for me is I've done diets in the past where I've wanted to try to figure out what were the best kind of carb sources for me in fats and blah, 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 blah. So I remember one time I did an experiment where I would eat only one type of carbohydrate, okay, for every meal of the day. And what I wanted to do was to see is how did my body process that food? Did it process it well? Did I feel like I had good energy? What was my hunger levels when I was eating that type of carbohydrate? So I did 8 weeks where the only carbohydrate I ate was oats. And I freaking hated it. So I had no energy. I was kind of like bloated and puffy belly the whole time. So I didn't really have like bathroom issues, but I just kind of felt like a fat whale, basically. Felt like I was walking around pregnant. But it was 8 weeks of misery, and I had predetermined myself to try it for at least 8 weeks. So that way I gave my body a chance to like adjust if there was maybe just an issue that was temporary. Because I'd hate to give up after 3 or 4 days and then find out it would have adjusted and been fine. So at 8 weeks I ate freaking oats and felt miserable. So oats were a 1, and I do not eat freaking oats anymore ever because, just like a diet I did in the past where I've done diets where I lost a significant amount of weight, like 50 pounds in like 10 weeks or less, and I ate brown rice for those. So I hate brown rice. I'll never eat brown rice unless I diet again. So oats and brown rice are foods I know I can use in a diet because I'll never eat the damn stuff more than what I need to for the diet. Then I did 8 weeks of sweet potato. And I found, for me personally, like sweet potato, I got okay energy from. But I just never, like I felt full and heavy. So it wasn't the same as oats. Like oats, I felt like I got no energy. And by the way, for all these 8 weeks, I controlled my calorie intake. So I was eating the same number of calories per type of carbohydrate. So it wasn't like I got less energy from oats because I was eating less food. That would be dumb. But oats, like I would eat my meal and it would be like, I could go take a nap, like I had no energy. Like it was almost like you were pouring gas into a car and there was a hole in the gas tank. That's what it felt like. I got nothing. So with sweet potato, I had good energy. Like I could tell I ate. I could get into my workouts. Like I felt energized throughout the day. But I was always kind of like stuffing food in my face. I never felt hungry for my next meal. And it kind of felt like it sat heavy in my belly. Then I did 8 weeks of white rice. And again, these are freaking 2 months at a time. So this was like a 6-month experiment. I ate 8 weeks um, of white rice, and it was jasmine rice, which is like a long grain white rice. And I felt good energy. I was hungry for my next meals. I had good workouts. I had good sustainable energy throughout my workouts. It wasn't like I started and crashed, which is common of sugary type foods. So I found out for my body type, for me individually, my body runs very well off of white rice. So guess what I eat most of the time? White rice. So I drink a lot of milk, but I eat like usually sushi or some type of meat and rice for lunch, and then I eat meat and rice for dinner. So I eat rice a lot because my body digests it well. And being 280 pounds, I have to get a lot of food in me every day. So I found white rice allows me to eat more throughout the day, but not feel heavy and bloated, as I felt with sweet potatoes and the oats. So this is stuff what I'm telling you guys, like in these podcasts, like steps to take or things to try. These are things I actually literally have done myself and with clients. So none of this is bullshit. None of it's an article that I read and I'm just passing off as knowledge. I have physically tried these things. So it's been 17 years of just insane experimentation and having fun with it. So I personally have done this. So when I tell you guys to do the 2-week journals with like rating foods 1, 2, and 3, I've done it myself. I've done it with tons and tons and tons and tons and dozens and dozens and dozens of clients. So it does work. Okay. So that's what you're going to do. Is you're going to go for 2 weeks, write down your foods, like the meals you had, rate them as 1, 2, or 3. Again, if you have a rating of 1, avoid that food for the full 2 weeks, the remaining of the time. If you have a rating of 2, you can keep that food in the mix. It's fine. If you have a rating of 3, try to eat those foods more often. Okay, at the end of the 2 weeks, you'll have a list of like number 2 foods and number 3 foods, and then that makes up your best diet. So those are your foods. Okay, then periodically, about once a week, you can retry like number 1s. So if you had a meal that was like labeled as a number 1, but you're like, damn, I really like that food. I wish I could eat that. You can retry it after the 2 weeks. Okay, and see if maybe there was just something situational. So you can even separate it out. So maybe you had a meal with a food item that you liked, but it was paired with like another item or two that you don't really care much about. You can try to separate out the item you like and retry it in your diet. Okay, or you can try new foods that maybe you didn't try during the 2-week period. The only rule is if you do have digestive stress, you have to wait 5 days at least, okay, before you try another food that might cause issues. So you want to eat 2s and 3s all the time, throw in a new food or a number 1 food only about once a week. So that way, again, if it causes digestive stress for you, you don't, keep retrying new things and keep getting stressed out, and all of a sudden even regular good foods are now going to start causing you problems. So often this is the case for people with IBS, is they'll eat something that irritates them and they don't go back to really healthy, good, perfect foods for them for long enough. So they have to do it for like a full week before they would try things new again, okay, or before they would risk trying something different at like a restaurant or out with friends. So in some specific cases I've had where I've worked with people like Crohn's disease, so I had one guy specifically, he went to the bathroom about every 2 hours of the day, so he had to work from home as like a call center type person. He couldn't have a job that he had to go anywhere because he could freaking go to the bathroom all the time. So that sucked, and he was very disappointed, was really having a hard time in life, very depressed, and felt pretty bad for him because we did like a food addition diet. So food elimination diets is kind of like you start with a big list of food. You try like, hey, let's eliminate these kind of things, see how you feel. If they feel okay, then we know that like that was a good thing to take out. If they don't feel any difference, then we can leave them back in. His food was so damn bad that we had to do a food addition where I just said, hey, here's 1 protein, here's 1 carb, here's some vegetables, maybe like some healthy fats. We have maybe like 1 item of like a protein, 1 item of carb, 1 item of fat, 1 item of vegetable. And we said, try these for a week. As his body normalated, got used to those food, we would maybe add in 1 thing, see how it went. So we ended up finding a list of 8 foods for him that he could eat and feel very confident and very comfortable with. Then we had a bunch of foods that were kind of like hit and miss. We weren't sure why Sometimes they didn't feel good and sometimes they did. So sometimes you don't have answers, by the way. It's just, okay, this is a maybe food. So he had 8 really good, definitively he knew he felt good foods. Then he had a bunch of foods that were like, I have no freaking clue. Sometimes these go good, sometimes they don't. And we even tried like different combinations, and it was hard to find any answer or rhythm to it. But at least we knew we had 8 good ones. Okay, so that was a pretty severe case where somebody was left with only 8 food items that they knew didn't make them feel bad. So I remember like our stories is he would go out with friends every now and then, and like say on a Saturday, like a Friday night, he'd go out with friends. He'd eat Mexican, have a margarita or two, have fun with his friends, just because he wanted to feel normal. But then he would spend all damn weekend in the bathroom. So he literally had a desk made that flipped down over his toilet, so he could sit on the toilet and do like computer work and stuff. So I felt pretty bad for him. So that's one of those cases in my mind where anytime I'm about to complain about something, I remember him, and I'm like, I need to shut the hell up and be grateful for the things I do have. So this job has helped me keep things in perspective very well. So we have other cases where I had to work with people with like celiac disease, where we did like eliminations based on what would be kind of like the standard normal foods that you would try to avoid, but they were still having issues. So then all of a sudden we found out that like certain dairy things were a problem. Whether it was like cooked vegetables versus raw vegetables. We found for some people they can't eat raw vegetables, but they can eat cooked vegetables. So there's a whole bunch of stuff out there in terms of like what annoys people's digestive systems and whatnot. And that's why certain tests, like a single blood type test or a single DNA test stuff, I doubt that they're going to be super effective, and they're not even necessary. You can go through and do your own like 2-week journaling and not have to pay anybody a dime and figure out this stuff on your own. Okay. Then we've also done the same thing with food allergies. So we found somebody before that they were allergic to fried eggs, but they could eat hard-boiled eggs and they'd be fine. So that was fun, trying to figure that out. But yes, so sometimes the way in which you cook an egg can influence whether you have an allergy to it. So sometimes people will eat weak eggs, say they eat eggs for like 2 or 3 weeks, and all of a sudden their stomach starts getting annoyed by the egg. If you change up the method in which you cook the egg, it does help a ton. So maybe you're going to fry, like a week, eat hard-boiled eggs for another week, I don't know, like poach the egg or whatever the hell the other things there are. Do that for a week. But sometimes changing up the way in which you cook your proteins can help you kind of stave off allergens or like allergic reaction type responses to proteins. Okay? So, hopefully this was helpful. This is one of our more simplistic podcasts, or at least in my mind. You guys might be laughing that I thought that. But this is a good way for you to kind of go through and find out what foods are best for you, and not have to pay anybody money, not have to take any tests, not have to do any kind of craziness. So just eat foods that you believe are healthy, okay, based on your knowledge and our Path podcasts, and just track the meals. Okay, give yourself a rating of 1, 2, or 3. So 1 is you felt awful. There was something wrong with the meal, like you didn't get any energy, you had cramps, gassy, bloating, stuff like that. 2 is the meal felt fine. There was nothing really noteworthy about it. And 3 is I felt really good. I felt energized. I felt like that was light on my stomach. So it was a good meal. So you want to rate your foods like that. If you get foods that are 1s, avoid them. Okay. Foods that are 2 and 3, you can eat those and focus more on the 3s most often. Okay. So this is a good way for you to find your foods and find what food categories, what food types, kind of what fits you best and what's going to make you feel the best. Okay. So if you go through this, sorry, I got the hiccups or something, but if you go through this and you run into any speed bumps or any obstacles, feel free to reach out to us. Our email is brutalironjim@gmail.com, and we'll help you kind of get over any hurdles you run through. But this is a really cool experiment. It's only 2 weeks of your life. For the love of God, like if you won't put 2 weeks into feeling good for the rest of your life, you're in trouble. So if you do have any interest in this, or if you do have digestive issues, just invest 2 weeks and it can help you learn a lot. So like I said, I did 3 8-week experiments, and those are just the carbohydrate ones. I've done protein experiments and fat experiments. So I've devoted 6 months of my life before to finding out the right carb, just the right carb. So all you guys gotta do is 2 weeks, okay? So give it a try. It's gonna be kind of cool. I think these kind of things are fun. You can learn more about your body. You can learn kind of just the fun, weird uniqueness in life, and it can help you feel better. So whenever I go traveling or go out with friends, I can be certain, or at least more certain, that I'll feel good while I'm out and about if I can stick to my good foods. So if you're ever traveling and you have like digestive problems or you're nervous about getting sick, when you're out with friends, this is a really cool way to identify foods that you can be confident and safe with. So that way you can have more fun, you can have more freedom, you don't have to have the mental stress. So very often people with IBS, like irritable bowel syndrome, they'll get sick just because they believed they could get sick. So they'll eat something and be like, oh, I don't know if that was really good for me or not. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And then bam, they get sick because they were almost like forced themselves into being sick. So if you go through and do a little experiment like this, it can help you get more peace with your food choices. And it can actually give you a lot more happiness and freedom in like small areas like that in life. So it's pretty cool, okay? So give it a try. If you need any help or if you have any questions, like I said, please reach out to us. So we want to help you. So if you're investing into this podcast, I truly, truly appreciate it. And I want to make sure that you're getting what you need to live a healthier and happier life out of these podcasts. So if there's anything that you would need help with to complete that process, please let us know. Cool. Okay. If you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, please share them, okay? So the more people we help, the happier the world will be. So if you know anybody that might benefit from these, please share them with them. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. And you can tell us at our email at brutaliron@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.